Veteran on the Move, number 36.
Hi, this is Anthony Tran from Marketing Access Pass, and you're listening to Joe Crane on Veteran on the Move.
Welcome to Veteran on the Move. If you're a veteran in transition, an entrepreneur wannabe, or someone still stuck in that JOB trying to escape, this podcast is dedicated to your success. And now, your host, Joe Crane.
The top 7 paths to freedom is my free gift to you for listening to the show, featuring 7 great ways for a veteran to take their first step into the exciting world of entrepreneurship. To receive your free gift, go to veteranontheMove.com, or if you're listening on a mobile device, you can text the word veteran to 38470. Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Givens retired from the U.S. Army in 1998 after 24 years of service. He was a mechanized infantryman working with tanks and Bradleys. His secondary specialty was Ordnance and logistics systems. At one point in his career, he served as a Joint Staff Liaison to the White House. He started a small service and manufacturing business in 1999 after his retirement from the Army, writing a patent and eventually landing a contract with the U.S. Army. He sold that business in 2012 and started the consulting business Greystone Defense, LLC. Jeff Givens, thanks for being on the show today. Can you start off by telling us what you did in your military career?
Sure, Joe. Thanks for having me. I was commissioned a brand new infantry second lieutenant from Kemper Military School and College in Boonville, Missouri in April of 1974. And from there went on to some of the traditional infantry lieutenant business. But my first unit was a mechanized infantry unit in 1st Armor Division in Germany. And so that took me to roughly 24 years of absolutely loving the heavy mechanized infantry and tank side of the house. My secondary specialty was ordnance maintenance systems. And so infantry and ordnance was my specialty. So tanks and infantry, 1st Armor Division, 1st Cavalry Division, 1st Infantry Division, all of those assignments, Fort Hood, Europe, Fort Riley, all the hauntings, I suppose you'd say, of the heavy mechanized infantrymen. I was a company commander 4 times, was also in the ordnance side of the house, a direct support, general support, maintenance company commander in a Pershing missile unit. And so you did a little bit of everything. You maintained and in some cases built or manufactured components for the Pershing missiles and all of its support side of the house. Later on was an XO for an armor battalion, was an XO for an armor brigade. And one of my highlights, I suppose, was I was on the Joint Staff at one point, an office at the Pentagon, duty station at Offutt Air Force Base, and flew on board the National Emergency Airborne Command Post and was a White House liaison at one point during the first Bush administration. So I had a great career, was in all the garden spots, Korea, Germany, did some short stuff in the Middle East, South America, Asia. So plenty of fun, but time to come home. Retired here in the Fort Leavenworth, Kansas area in 1998, and spent a little bit of time over about a year looking for a business to buy or buy into, as I didn't want to just sit behind a cubicle and do stuff. Just couldn't imagine that.
Yeah, I can hear you there, Jeff. I mean, what a phenomenal, broad, in-depth Army career you had. I could just tell by listening to all the units you'd been in and all the different places you'd been stationed. I mean, what an incredible career you had. And I'm real curious, before we get started on the business side of things, while you were still in the Army, I mean, you sounded like one of those all-in, really dedicated soldiers. Did you ever think about going into business for yourself or the business world or the civilian world while you were still in the Army, or were you just foresight focused and not even thinking ahead?
Well, I would have to say boresight focused while I was in the Army. I played around with the stock market a little bit, learned how to make a little bit of money off of that. But you'd have had to, during the time I was in from 74 to 98, you'd have to be fairly stupid to not make some money in the stock market because it was constantly going up. So I don't want to pat myself on the back there too much. But my father retired from the Army in 1963, and they're in the Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri area, and he started up businesses. So I'd helped him do a few things in that arena and encouraged my two children to do the same. So I knew eventually that I was going to probably dance with that, and I just didn't like the prospect of just going the traditional route and working for a government contractor. I just thought there were some things that I wanted to do, and I had a couple of ideas, I'll readily admit, that as I watched my soldiers over the years change M1 tank track by hand, my truckers changing 600-pound Hemet tires by hand, and I always knew we had some great tools that were out there in the civilian side of the house, but there weren't any power plants or power units to help us do all that stuff. So I had a lot of ideas and didn't really know how I was going to jump into that, but I figured I would know it when I saw it.
And so as you were preparing to retire from the Army, this was back in 98. I'm sure the transition process was similar, but yet also quite different back then from what it is now. Did you get much benefit out of the transition programs available to you at the time, and did you utilize those?
I will confess I played at them just a little bit, but was probably only half listening in that, looking back on it. One of the things that I did do when I established myself in the Fort Leavenworth area, it was only here 18 months, knew when I left Korea that I was going to be retiring. I had upgraded in Korea my degree, and I had a master's in business, which, as I later on found out, didn't necessarily help me with a small business. It's more theory than anything, but it does help you at least sound a little more intelligent if you're not already. So that was one. But I put together a team of a business consultant, a business attorney, an accountant, and a banker here in Leavenworth. And we met on a monthly basis, some of whom I had to pay. And they would brief me on businesses that they thought might be available for me to purchase or buy into. And this was before I even got out of the Army. And we did that once a month, and we discussed two businesses. And I learned from that. There was great fear in pulling the trigger, of course, to do that, because you're talking, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I'd saved a lot of money, but didn't want to spend it all on that. So on the one hand, you want to go into business, and on the other hand, you don't want to spend any money. It's quite a conundrum. So we did that right before I was getting ready to retire in the January-February 98 time period. A friend of mine came to me and he said, "Hey, look, how would you like to come and work with me in the security side of the house?" And it's security systems for card readers and systems like that, high security, not a guard post. And I thought, I said, okay, I can only promise you about 8 months because I'm going to go off on my own deal. But I thought it was an opportunity to learn how to sell. And so, because although we learn a lot of things in the military, how to supervise military folk and stuff like that, generally speaking, we're not doing a cold call, knocking on a door, trying to sell something. In reality, after that 8-9 months, I realized that we do a lot of things in the military to sell. For instance, you're a company commander, or you're an XO, or you're an S3, and you have a particular program that you want to do. Maybe you want to run a different setup in a tank table 8. Maybe you want to do something different in a field exercise. You develop that program. It's something different than what your unit already is doing, and so you have to sell that to a variety of people. So we do, in fact, sell in the military. We just don't look at it that way. So that's part and parcel to beginning to run a business. And so, strangely enough, I have never. I probably shouldn't admit this on the podcast, but I've never written a resume. I started one, and then was really hired away into this security business, and did it for actually about 10 months, I guess. And then by that time, I was positioned to buy the remnants of a small company, and then bring that business to fruition.
What kind of company was that? That's actually what you ended up doing, right?
Well, I did. I probably looked at probably 30 companies with this little group that I'd put together on a monthly basis. It cost me several $1,000s to get them together, and sometimes we had dinner and everything. But what I was doing my homework on some due diligence of businesses that they knew about. And of course, small business, the owner's not putting a for sale sign out front, or the employees will run away. And I was looking for something that involved welding and the sheet metal side of the house, maintenance, a service business that I could move to building something. And I didn't know what that something was, but I wanted to build something. And I had a few ideas, fairly lofty, but that I'd thought of over the years. And so, as we would look through the potentials for some of these businesses, and every banker knows all the businesses that he works with. All your accountants know those businesses. Business attorneys have lots of contacts, and any business consultant, they have contacts as well. And so you're able to wander through that minefield, and it is a minefield because it really depends on everybody telling the truth. So it's one of those things you kind of know the business when you see it, especially after several. So I found one that appealed to me. It was a service business, and they also built a few products for the truck industry. And I thought that looked pretty neat, and so decided to go down and visit these guys. And we visited a number of businesses, but this one I visited. And when I first walked in the door, it was about a 22,000 square foot building. And it was pretty dark on the inside, lots of grease, about 20 some odd employees. And there was machine tools, and they were rebuilding engines, and they had a welding area and fabrication area in the back, and the carpets were absolutely filthy and trashed. And strangely enough, and they had a parts area. And strangely enough, I walked in, and although my motor pools that I helped to run years past were much cleaner, and a lot more people that to a good degree, they looked better. I knew what every aspect of this business was supposed to do. I knew about parts systems. I knew about some fabrication. I knew about maintenance and repair. And so from that aspect of it, I felt pretty comfortable. So after that point, it's just a matter of cleaning it up. What I didn't anticipate was that the company was absolutely bankrupt. And the owner of the company didn't even own the company. The company was, in fact, owned by a group called the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, and the Missouri Department of Revenue. And because they owed so many taxes, and they were within, months of having to close. The trouble was, although I had saved a good deal of money in the Army and made money in the stock market, after I looked at the price of a business that was going strong. Remember, this is 1998. I could not afford a business that was going strong. I couldn't. I could not afford one that was going to make money right off the bat. And I was going to have to search for something that was a medium. And so I jumped into that minefield. We did our due diligence on the owner of the company. In some cases, he was a little bit shady, but not unusual from some of the stuff that I had looked at. And they were doing a lot of business. It wasn't very efficient. Company was open about 6.5 days a week. And lots of trucks, lots of stuff going through, a day shift, a night shift, lots of moving parts. So diving into the financials, which was never my strong suit, I distinctly avoided. I have a defective mathematics gene in my makeup, and avoided that like the plague everywhere I went in school. And amazingly enough, that does not do you any good when you're running a small business. You are intimately involved in that. No one will operate that business to the same level of interest that you will as the business owner. So eventually the numbers kind of matched up, and with some of the stuff that I was looking at and where I thought I could take the company. I actually had somebody do a marketing survey for me. Paid about $5,000 for it in 1999 dollars, and that served as kind of a beginning roadmap, or an operations plan for the business. I wrote up a business plan, and didn't do very good on the first one. The banker kind of spanked me on that thing, so the accountant, but it was a reasonably good spanking. I didn't come out with too many bruises. And redid it and used that for my roadmap. And so then the big day came to have to make the decision to go into it, and we did it. My wife was scared to death. I was scared to death. My bank account was shivering. And my financial advisor, matter of fact, I did not get one single encouraging word from anybody that I can recall. I certainly didn't have a mentor to hunt down, and with my lofty ideals of going into manufacturing through the service business, and matter of fact, the two businesses are fairly mutually exclusive in some areas. You're not doing manufacturing and service in the same business. Even says that in QuickBooks, the accounting system. But I, of course, knew better. So as a new guy, we went ahead and pulled the trigger on it. I first went and negotiated with the IRS, a very daunting process, which if somebody's very interested in that, they can get a hold of me and we can discuss some of that at length. A very scary process. And then after you get some concessions from those guys, you deal with the state Internal Revenue Service. And you have to nail down exactly what the company owes, because you certainly don't want to pay these two entities anything and then not get a clear title for everything, or even an opportunity for them to come after you later on. Then you become responsible for the previous owner's debts. And in the end, the previous owner didn't have any say over it at all. He invested almost 20 years of his life in that business and absolutely got nothing. As a matter of fact, they came after him later on for more taxes. So
Wow.
I got away fairly clean on that, but it was risky, and in that. So that was the idea. Heck of a risk, but the dollars that I'd saved over the years in the military and the stock market, I'd always had a thought that I may end up using those for business. We had learned before we ever left the Army to live completely on our retired pay, and we had no debt, or potential retired pay, and so no debt or anything. So that put us in a fairly unique position. I didn't need to have any kind of a steady income from this business, as long as it didn't demand too many saved up dollars from me. I did indeed have to write some checks to the IRS and the Missouri Department of Revenue, but in the end, bought a business that had about $1.6 million in sales. That was really verifiable. They were spending about $1.7.5 million, so losing about $100,000 a year in that. But after I paid the IRS $85,000 and the Missouri Revenue Service about $50,000, I only had to borrow about $250,000 from the bank. And so on a business with revenue of 1.6, it's entirely possible to get that paid back fairly quickly. So when we did the math on it and what the possibilities were, and looking at the marketing study, it makes sense. It was a risk. The bank did present the loan, and this was at a time when they were not exactly risk averse, but I mean they were in there, and they looked at my account, and of course you take the risk on everything. I mean, you sign away everything. If an employee loses their job, all they lose is a job. They were looking for one before they came to you. If you lose that business, you lose your house, your savings account, your car, whatever else they can put on you. And of course, you have a nasty record on any time you try to borrow money. So that's a risk, and you look that in the face every single day in one of those businesses. So it's not for everybody.
That's not. It brings up an interesting point. Most veterans are not necessarily comfortable, but they're used to or familiar with the concept of risking their life in the execution of their duties in the military. But they're not comfortable, or they're not used to risking their own money in the execution of their duties of a business. And in the civilian world, it's the exact opposite. In the civilian world, you risk your money. It's a common daily practice out there to risk your money to try to get ahead. But civilians are not real comfortable with risking their life. And so it's really a total 180 from what a lot of military folks are used to when they're coming out in the civilian sector.
I guess let me put that in perspective a little bit. And you're exactly right. There was a number of times that I risked my life in the Army. I mean, I was in a helicopter crash, wasn't even a pilot, and a couple of near drownings and a few near shootings and all that stuff. And really, you weather that pretty good with a lot of training. I will tell you, the very first time that the dollars don't match, and I'll give you a perspective here. When 9/11 happened, I was the business owner for approximately 2 years. The business was losing a little bit of money each month, but not much. We were getting there. I had a couple of ideas for manufacturing. I'd gone to some of the trade shows and things like that. I had some ideas that weren't available in the industry, and I thought would make some great products to be able to build and sell. So I was working on that, had some dollars invested in R&D and things like that. And then 9/11 happened. When 9/11 happened, all of our truck business, maintenance business, and we're talking heavy trucks, medium trucks, internationals, Freightliners, Peterbilts, stuff like that. And we're adding components to the back end of it. We're putting cranes and bucket trucks and bucket systems and all that stuff on these trucks. And I studied it incessantly just to get it right, or at least so we wouldn't get sued if somebody fell off the top of it. And when 9/11 happened, our shop was empty for almost 90 days.
Completely empty?
It was. The customers that normally had those trucks, they weren't sure what was going on. And so business-wise, they hunker down. I mean, everything just stops. And frankly, I mean, I had 28 employees, and I really didn't know what to do. I mean, there was really nobody you could call. Tons of cash is getting sucked out of your savings account, your bank account, to keep people on the payroll. And I will tell you, you compare, that feeling when you're getting shot at. You generally don't feel too much when you're getting shot at, and it's not aimed fire. It's going somewhere else, and it's a noise. It's something. But when some of that stuff comes close to you, you get an interesting feeling. On the civilian side of the house in a business, when you don't have any more cash, you can't go back to the bank anymore. It's a Friday, or correction, it's like a Wednesday. You're probably not going to get enough revenues in on Thursday to meet payroll on Friday. I will tell you, the knot in your stomach is something that just is not comfortable. Hard time sleeping, and all the stuff that you worked hard for potentially is going to go down the toilet. And it's and sometimes it can happen fairly quickly. Well, I had to make a decision. I let go half of the employees right before Christmas. And I'll tell you, unlike the Army, when you would fire somebody, we never were able to really fire somebody because it took months to get them out of the service. And even after that, they had benefits and all that stuff. When you fire somebody in the civilian side of the house, you let them go. They lose everything instantly. And they lose all their medical care. They lose all their insurance. They lose anything. And you end up, you try to do it in a nice manner, but you're the business owner, and all of them believe that you're rich, sucking out cash from the company so that you hold them down. And that's just it's the reality is that anybody can go out and start their own business. Anybody, and they just have to have the imagination and work ethic, I suppose, to see it through. And so I was blessed with the I had an account that I'd saved over the years, and we used that, weathered the storm, and then got our first nod in 2002 at one of the shows in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, that the Army was kind of sort of interested in a product that I had and brought down there to them. And I was overjoyed. But that bit of overjoyedness does not equal a sale in the Army. Department of Defense, you are selling to a system and a process, not a person. And if you don't understand that system and process, or you don't know, what buttons to push, you are a little guy without much money, looking on the inside, and there's plenty of bars between you and not I'm talking iron bars that you have to cut with big torches. So anyway, that's some of it. So I guess one of the things, where did I come up with the idea for my business? Years of watching soldiers change that tank track out by hand, hem of tires by hand, and so I developed a small engine-driven multiple power unit. It provided hydraulic power, electric power, and compressed air, all out of one box, operated by a small diesel engine. Now, the very first one that I built down in my little R&D section, which you'd be horrified if you have looked at my R&D section.
Sounds like a fancy name.
Yes, my research and development area in the company. Matter of fact, lots of people laughed when they saw that. And big nasty thing there was 2 bare light bulbs in the top of the deal in the back of this 22,000 square foot building. I'm slowly cleaning. It took me 3 years to clean the mess out of that building while operating. It was incredible. Cleaning a mess out of a building, out of a service building, has nothing to do with making money and profit. So it kind of gets thrown to the back burner, shamefully enough. And so my first R&D project that I did, we came out with this behemoth. It weighed about 3,600 pounds and was loud, but I quickly realized there was nothing like it out there. And so at the same time, I was running out of money, and I needed to put together a patent. So like all good Army officers, we have the ability to study. And so I started studying systems, and I learned how to write a mechanical patent. It certainly wasn't perfect. I hand wrote the drawings. As an infantryman, they trained me to draw a stick man really well. And those little symbols on the map, to tell platoons which direction to go.
Right.
But it just doesn't much help you drawing a mechanical drawing. I did it by hand, and U.S. Patent Office kicked it back. I think it was like 4 times, and I just kept on doing it until finally one day they accepted it, and I got a patent pending. And at that point, I could sell one of the systems. And I already had a customer who was interested, and he wanted to weigh about 2,000 pounds instead of my dainty 3,800. And so he bought it, still weighed 2,500. But the Army was more and more interested at that point, and I was making a lot of contacts. So I suppose you could call me a 12-year overnight success.
That's usually the way it is.
And that's exactly right. And I actually had a 5-year plan, and boy, that didn't. They always say that operations plan lasts until you cross the line of departure. That can also be the same way in business. You spend so much time working in the business, you don't have time to work on the business, and it's tough. It's a tough, it's a tough deal. And so eventually, I got an Army contract out of it, which was much delayed. And I had also targeted some very old pieces of equipment in the Army that were due to be replaced, and that was helpful in it. And then once purchase orders started coming in, I eventually the partners that I had taken on, which is a completely different story, could easily take up 3 hours of somebody's time. Bringing on partners, a plus or a minus. And sold the company for quite a profit to the partners, and the soldiers in the Army got some great pieces of equipment.
So that's pretty much the success story of buying a company and resurrecting it, coming out with a new product, and ultimately selling out, right?
Well, yes, there's plenty of risks in that deal, lots of minefields. I suppose if I'd have had a mentor to bounce things off of, that might have changed. Nowhere in my family was anybody a manufacturer. They were all, they would rent apartments, or they would. My father owned a nightclub and a couple other businesses, but nothing that related to engineering, service work in a heavy industry, and And strangely enough, the product I had really didn't have too much competition. I mean, it's anytime somebody would ask me, they said, well, do you have any competitors? I said, sure. Anybody that brings a single power that operates off a single engine to the work site is a competitor. So Honda Generators was a competitor, but oh, by the way, they didn't produce air and they didn't produce hydraulic power. Ingersoll Rand produced air, but not generator, not hydraulic power to work sites. So mine was unique. It fit a niche. The timing was right. So I don't know how I certainly didn't know that when I started the business. It really morphed into that. And I knew there was possibilities. And so went after it.
I have to commend you, because back at the very beginning, where you actually pulled a team together, an accountant and the banker, and you even paid for some of these guys to meet with him on a regular basis. I mean, that's pretty forward thinking and kind of out of the box mentality for someone who hasn't even been in business before to do something like that, especially over many months, to just try to find that diamond in the rough. You put a lot of time and money into something that you knew might not even pan out, and very unique way, a very effective way. Almost reminds me of like a mastermind group. I guess none of them were really mentors for you, but they were people in the business world that knew you were looking for a business, trying to help you out. So, pretty forward thinking and out of the box way of going about trying to find a business.
Well, a couple of things there. I mean, a banker, an accountant, and a business attorney. To include a business consultant. They have no stake in your business.
That kind of sounds like the beginning of a joke, right?
Yeah, I'm telling you. And I can't think of one right off the bat, because they later on turned into friends. But they're not really going to invest in your business initially. You don't have to pay for the banker to be there, but you're paying for a business consultant to be on your team. You're paying for the lawyer to be there. And the accountant, you're paying for their time. The banker wants your business, of course. And if he doesn't come, you just pick another banker. But none of them, generally speaking, none of them own or operate their own business. They work for somebody. And I've sat in rooms before, and there's a big difference when you walk into a meeting and there's a president and CEO of a company that owns his or her business, and they're in a room with a president and CEO that just works for a business. And these are people that look at things very differently. And one can make decisions instantly, the one that owns their own business, because they are a dictator. And the other one has to go before a board of directors to get permission to do anything. And so it's interesting. The commander of a battalion, by and large, is a dictator of sorts, but not like a business owner, because not only are you responsible for everything in that business and what it does and doesn't do, everybody that doesn't have a stake in your business will hold you responsible financially. In that, to the detriment of your family. So when I first jumped into it, I did not have any lofty ideas of potentially failing at all. And I knew I would be a success. But I will tell you, halfway through my 12-year business ownership, I, on occasion, had some doubts. And there weren't too many places you could turn to do that. So in the end, you're kind of forced to take on partners to a degree. And depending on how you put that plan together, that's fraught with peril. In there, and especially if they've never been an entrepreneur before. Or maybe they have been. Maybe they're looking to take advantage of you. In there, you don't know. They're not friends, they're business partners. And if you don't have it all legally laid out, each person's responsibility and what they're going to do for you, it's it can be difficult in later years when the business is a success story and you go to sell it. As you know, a failure is only on that person. Nobody's responsible. But a success story, everyone, no matter how little part they had in it, claimed to be of great assistance. So that's how.
Of course, yeah.
That's how that works.
Failure is an orphan, and success has 1,000 fathers. Right?
There you go. Yes, very good, very well put. Better than my wordy term there.
Well, I wanted to ask you, Jeff. There's statistics out there that show veterans are 30 to 40% more likely to succeed in running their own business. What things do you think you learned in your military career over 24 some years that helped you in getting that business back on its feet?
Well, generally speaking, we don't accept failure lightly. I ran into lots of business owners that, it was their first business. They were kind of wandering through it. They'd never been in the military or something like that. And you could take a little bit of advice from those guys. But I will tell you, the ones who have been bankrupt in a business before and came back and either started another business and were successful or brought that same business back. Those are people that you can really respect. And to an Army guy or gal, to have some business present them with a product and the business owner in their stuff, when they check it out, the business has been bankrupt before, and they instantly have a negative connotation on that. Oh, this is bad company to deal with. And it could be. You have to investigate it. But it's somebody who didn't quit. They didn't stop just because it got extremely hard. And in the military, generally speaking, the good officers and NCOs, the good folks in there, they don't stop when it gets hard. And obviously in a combat situation, if you stop, you get killed. So there's some extra motivation. But there's plenty of other things in training that if you stop because it got too hard, then somebody else just takes your place that didn't look at it as hard. So I think that is one thing right there. Now there's the stupid factor that comes into that as well, and that is, it's like some people told me, it's stupid to keep this business open because you're not going to make any money in the foreseeable future, and you're going to stay in trouble with the bank. Take it into bankruptcy and work it out from there. I just couldn't see doing it. And in there, got lucky a couple of times, and brought on a partner and did some things there that kept the company out of bankruptcy. And then later on, the company made millions, but nobody remembers that. They just in business, they just remember, oh my God, you guys came so close so many times that that it was it was there, kind of a standing joke among my friends. I'd buy them lunch or something like that, and I'd tell them, now I want to tell you, this is the last, this is the change I took out of the Coke machine that we owned, because we had to do that to make payroll, and so we're buying your lunch and making payroll with the change out of the Coke machine at Candy. Manny didn't get that joke, but a lot of business owners had been bankrupt before or been in some kind of trouble. They got it real quick. So you just can't, if you believe in what you're doing, you can't stop just because it gets hard.
I would say you've eventually made a successful entrepreneur, and now that you've become this entrepreneur, would you consider yourself unemployable?
Well,
could you ever go back to that job?
Well, and it'd be hard. I think, because you've always got, things you'd like to change. You've got ideas you want to pursue as a result of being an entrepreneur. I mean, unless you had a truly terrible experience. I am of the opinion that businesses like manufacturing, things that bend sheet metal, drill holes, weld things, and build a product, are actually the basis for which our country really gets its wealth. Pushing electrons around and pushing paper from one place to another is more a service business, and it literally has to suck off of the financial success of companies that are in true manufacturing, that build a product, that move it out of the country to the military, to international sales or what have you. So I have a fairly jaded opinion of that, and so I'd have a hard time seeing myself working for a company that doesn't do something like that. If I believed in their product, I could make that transition. Right now I haven't had to. I started this little consulting company and consult with to companies that do work with the Department of Defense, mainly ones that bend sheet metal, drill holes, and stuff like that, and made enough from the other company that I don't have to work too hard, so don't have to make any promises I can't keep. So that's that's a part of it. But once you make a lot of money, everybody's your friend. After that, they're trying to find out ways to sneak some of that off to them. So with that, so I don't think I'm unemployable. But if somebody asked me for my resume tomorrow, I'd have to sit there and go through it. I really never made one. I always had an intention that I would start a business or buy into one, even when I was retiring, because of some ideas I had. So I'd have to put one together and think it through and all that. So I don't think I'm unemployable, but it's possible. And I suppose if you got enough money, you don't care.
That's right.
But if I did get employed by someone, I would want to be able to help them with a product that is of use to soldiers, that makes soldiers' life better in there. And I am a soldier. My father was a soldier. His father was a soldier. And I've got a son and a son-in-law that are soldiers. So we're a military family. I try not to get involved in too much that's not going to do them some good down the road, either with learning or a piece of equipment that all soldiers or Department of Defense folks would need. So that's what interests me. So that's what I put my time and effort into.
Now, Jeff, to the veteran out there that's listening to your story of success and struggle there for many years, especially in the beginning, what advice would you have for the veteran out there that's seeing a transition on their horizon?
Well, the first thing I'd tell him if he called me and explained what he was trying to do, I use the analogy of back when I was going through the infantry advanced course and some night school, myself and a buddy of mine, to learn something about business, a special forces guy. Those guys sometimes are fraught with peril. And we decided to start a tree cutting business in Columbus, Georgia, while we were taking this degree completion course. And some squirrels fell out of the tree, babies. The mother ran off. Well, we couldn't leave the little baby squirrels there, so we decided we're going to raise them in the BOQ room. And so we went to the library, look up a book, How to Raise Squirrels. And the first thing on the page on that book said, get rid of them.
Really?
And so if somebody was to call me tomorrow, explain to me about the business they're going into, I'd probably tell them, don't do it. And I would explain all the reasons why they shouldn't do it. And then if at that point, if they were undeterred and had some ideas that just they had to go through with, at that point I'd say, okay, prove it. prove to me that your idea, your thing, is going to at least be competitive with other things that are out there. Because you can build another hamburger stand, right next to McDonald's. Nobody should be afraid about putting together another hamburger stand just because there's a bunch of them there. But yours better be pretty good. If all you're trying to capture is maybe 2% of the market or 5% or whatever you're trying to capture on that corner, it better be good. Your service better be superior, and you got to have a couple of unique twists in there. And it's not about price. So I would give them the advice of first look at the reasons why you shouldn't do it, and then look at the reasons why you should. There's only advantages and disadvantages. And, if you're risk averse, or partially so, you are going to be tested in your business ownership. Imagine one morning walking in your business, and I did this every day. I'd come in my old beat up clothes, and I would clean the executive crappers. Now, I did that because I didn't want to pay anybody else to do it. I didn't want to bring in an employee early to go do that. I vacuumed the floors. I cleaned up the offices. Then by the time the employees came in, I was in my everyday work stuff, and would go out and supervise a few efforts in the shop, do some accounting stuff, do some business transactions, approve some supply actions back in the R&D shop. So I was, kind of dirty by the time noontime rolled around and I had to be at some luncheon in business casual. So I'd change out of my, clean up, change out of my stuff, get into my business casual, run down to this thing. And then later on that evening, I'd be in something that required, full business dress, suit and tie, and all that stuff. In the evening at something that I had to go. So in one day, I'm in 4 different outfits. So you're wearing all the hats, and you better be comfortable with it, or your business will not be there. Now, if you got millions and you can afford to buy a business that's already got a staff and all that stuff in there, and you're an Army officer, they may have to have an investigation on you, see if you've sold too much fuel in Afghanistan or whatever the deal is. But generally speaking, we come out with a fair amount of knowledge. We are risk averse financially, but not so when it comes to that. So for the long haul, for the United States of America, I suppose, we are getting training in the military to a degree, free of charge or paid for it, and it's like a savings account for America. And can you give back through business ownership that makes money and pays employees and does all that stuff? I believe that's one aspect of it. And some people that come out of the military and retire are uniquely suited to do that. No one is perfectly suited, but some are uniquely suited to do that. We are certainly given the education and the tools to do it. So if you live within your means, you're not in debt, you've saved up a lot of money, and you know what what debt means, and your family lives that, and you have an idea that you want to jump into for a business, a product, or something. The first thing I'd tell you is add up all the dollars and don't do it. If you want to ignore that advice, then come on down, join us, and it's a unique crowd when you meet several business owners in town that do have businesses from a bar and all that stuff. And we'd all discuss how quickly we entered into debt. Imagine I retired a lieutenant colonel and within 4 years owed a bank $2.5 million. And you think about that right now in your own business that you got, and you're going, oh my gosh, darn, that's terrible. Well, depends on how much you're making. If the business is making $3 million, so what? It's commas and periods, and so then you do have something in common with that. So we are, to a degree, the military trains us to be financially risk adverse, but not with our life. A strange setup.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, you shared a great story with us, and your experiences can do us a lot of good, and some really great advice also mixed in throughout your story. One thing I'd like to ask you is, what business are you in now, and finish that off with. If anybody out there would like to get a hold of you, contact you for whether it be advice or some details on transition, if you'd be willing to share that with us also.
Sure. As I made the decision to sell my business to the partners, I actually made the decision in 2011. It actually took until about the end of 2012 to finally get it sold. You're going through lots of stuff at the time, and it's not a simple fact of somebody says yes and you go through it. There's a lot of legal hurdles you have to jump. During that time period, I knew I was going to jump out and start another business, so I started one. I started a business called Greystone Defense LLC. And it's GRAYSTONE, Defense LLC, with the idea that it would eventually become a consulting company. It's got a cage code. It's a legal entity from the IRS and the Department of Revenue in Kansas. You file whatever you have to file in all that stuff. And so I started that business, and for the first 2 years, it really didn't do anything but sit there and gain time. So you can sit there and say, yeah, it's been in business for 2-3 years. It's got a website, and in there, and that's GraystonDefense.com, GRAY Defense.com. And unless you have a passcode, you can't get inside the website at all. And I don't give that passcode out unless somebody's actually got a signed contract with me. So you'll just see a single page out there, and it looks tantalizing, but don't bother. If you have some interest, you can contact me at J. Givens, and that's Juliet Golf India Victor Echo November Sierra at GraystonDefense.com, all one word. And make sure you spell Gray, Gray. It's been kind of interesting. It is a consulting business, and you get contracts that could last 3 months, 6 months, 1 month, 2 days, and that it's got right now 3 clients. I do not tell any of the clients who the other one is because somebody could be competing, and then you have to maintain a certain amount of ethics with that. But by and large, you're helping them move through some of the JSIDS process for the military. Where do you focus your sales on? Is this product something that could be of use? Is this, and I've learned that over the years, and I go to the shows, the AUSA convention, the winter symposium, the, engineer stuff, any place that somebody's showing hardware, not sophisticated electronics, but mainly hardware. And they're into manufacturing or dealing with manufacturers, so I can help them. And did that answer your question?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
So if there's a veteran out there that has an interest in your area of expertise, send you an email and link up and then go from there. So
absolutely. And my cell phone number is 816-769-9800. 9048. And I prefer an email. I get it on my new iPhone, and it connects to my MacBook Air, and I'm so electronified that
You're all wired up.
yeah, I'll probably get strangled by a headphone or something here at some point in time. So who knows?
All right, Jeff, we're pretty much out of time here. And once again, I appreciate you being here and sharing your story with us. I'll give you the last word, last parting bit of advice before we say so long.
I guess the best I can say is live within your means. Learn to do that. I know our U.S. government overall hasn't learned that, but you need to learn it personally for your family. Learn to live off of your retired pay. And at that point, you get real comfortable on what you need to do. And if you're not living on that retired pay before you leave the Army, take a hatchet to everything that's out there, and to include your house. Maybe you bought a house that was too big. But if you can't live off that retired pay, you have to make plenty of compromises in either working for someone or owning your own business. If you elect to work for someone, you have by and large signed up to make someone else wealthy with your work. And if that's okay with you, then no problem. Good on you. I don't think anything less of you. But if you want to decide to make yourself wealthy, then you become the business owner. And that's it. Anything I can help you with, send me an email, and I usually respond within 24 hours. So not a problem. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you,
Jeff.
Joe.
That's great. Thank you, and hooah.
Hooah.
Thank you for listening to Veteran on the Move, your pathfinder to freedom. If you like the show, leave us a review on iTunes. Reviews are always greatly appreciated. So until next time, this veteran is Oscar Mike.